Welcome to the Calzone. This episode is one of the Thesis interviews finding out how entrepreneurs are using their podcast to help their business. I hope y'all enjoy. Man, tell me, how did you start the podcast? What was that story?
So how we started it was it's actually it's a good one. So my good friend who I actually used to coach basketball with, he started a media company called Boot Crew Media. So down here in New Orleans, Louisiana, they call it the Boot, and a big famous bar is the Boot. And so he started a media company, and he wanted to do podcasts for it because that's when podcasts were blowing up. It was kind of middle or right when COVID happened. Um, and he had nothing but sports and kind of like local sports podcasts. So he had a Saints one and a Pelicans one, which is our football and basketball team here. And he was like, Kent, I need another one. And I was going fishing and or hunting pretty much every day during COVID because it was there's nothing to do. So I was like, let's go fishing and hunting. So he was like, I need you to do a hunting and fishing podcast. I think it could be really good here. And me and my co-host Chase, we were we were like, I don't think I'm not going to do it. I don't really feel like doing it. And then one day I was just sitting bored in for work. I was just making calls and I was like, yeah, might be fun to do it and let's see what it does. So we ended up doing it. He came up with the name Sportsman's Paradise Podcast. And in they
SPP.
call they call Louisiana the Sportsman's Paradise. So we were like, let's do it. Um, and then we just started doing our talking about our past trips, talking about where we were going, and stuff like this. And it kind of caught on. Um, and we knew some liquor reps and some of the people in town to get sponsors so it could fund it. So once we got some sponsors, we were like, well, this is pretty fun. Let's keep doing it. So we kept doing it. Started to slow down a little bit just because we've gotten a little more busier now, gotten older, but it's still
So you
fun.
got you got sponsors for the podcast initially.
Yep, for the podcast. So we would read ads and things like that to make money.
Okay. And so who was sponsoring the podcast?
So we had Twisted Tea, which was
Nice.
and then we would have your classic your Manscapes. We would call some local companies like our first one we ever had was uh AC Air Condition. It was an air conditioned brand, and they sent us a read, and it was priceless. We used to love reading it. So we had that was our first one, and then we got Twisted Tea, who ended up sponsoring our fishing rodeo, which we could get into later in it, which is now our big thing.
Okay. And so am I right in assuming that the podcast happened first and the rodeo came from after that?
Yeah,
Is that how it happened?
podcasts happened first. We did the podcast for probably a year. And then we were like, how do we do something where we can meet people listening and make it fun and together? And some people were saying maybe do like a live podcast, but that kind of seemed boring because all we really do is talk about fishing and hunting, and we go
Right.
off random tangents on really anything. I mean, half the time sometimes we'll just talk about our favorite movies or some
Beautiful.
dumb stuff.
So it starts
But
with fishing and it goes anywhere. It's not
yeah, we
super specific.
not super. Well, I'll do a little bulletproof outline of things we need to talk about, but it's not super specific. It's just me and him pretty much having a conversation and hanging out.
Love
Um,
that. And it's just the two of you, or do you have guests on sometimes?
so it's just the two of us, but we used to always like to have a guest on. So it was awesome. So we got to meet. We brought in some of like Louisiana fishing legends, and we were luckily they came on. Then we had
Who are these fishing legends? Like off the top of your mind, who'd you meet?
we had this guy um this one guy I cannot believe I'm forgetting his name. This one actually wasn't a Louisiana legend. But Chaz Champagne was a Louisiana legend. And then we had this guy, Devin, from LA Fish Blog Elite, he runs a big, so Chad Champagne, he owns and operates probably the biggest artificial plastic baits. And he made them, the Matrix Shad. So we got him on. We talked about all that, how he built the business, all that. And then we had let's see. Give me one sec. I gotta find this other guy because he was the first guy. I met this guy at the racetrack at the fairgrounds, and we just started talking about it. And he was like, "Oh well, I'm good friends with Oh, give me one second.
Take your
All
time.
right, let's see. Um, let's see, Cal. Here he is. Jackie Bushman, who is the founder and CEO of Buckmaster. And he was the first guy to ever have a TV show. Now they have a podcast, but he was the first guy to ever have a TV show on deer hunting on cable television.
Wow.
Um, and he was kind of like the pioneer of getting sports and outdoors on TV. And he probably has the greatest episode with all of his stories and finding sponsors and all that stuff.
Wow.
So that was one of our big gets. And it was funny how we just met some guy at the racetrack who put us in touch with him and his team. And it was like so professional. We were like talking to his assistants and all of this. And then he just like popped on the Zoom without us ever talking to him. Like, holy shit. What up, Jackie? So it was pretty cool. That was
That's
one of the cool
amazing.
ones.
And so then from there, you were doing the podcast for a year, and then you decided you were going to launch the fishing rodeo.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
So
How
when
did that happen? How did that come into place?
so we kind of just we were like, I think it could be a good way to raise money. And at the time, our cousin passed away, who was a big fisherman, and we thought he would really enjoy it. So we did it kind of as a fundraiser, the first one to donate some money to get people off opioids and things like that. So the first one was kind of a friends and family, some followers. It was the smallest. And Twisted Tea held it, and it was a hit. We rented out a marina in the Wrigley's, like Slidell, Louisiana, and I think we had like 15 teams, um, free food, free alcohol. And then we called a ton of sponsors to donate money for food and prizes and everything like that.
And how
Um,
many people, can you walk me through a little bit these you know, it's year one, 15 teams. How many sponsors were they? How were you getting in touch with them? To what extent are they tied in with the podcast? What's that relationship?
so we would call them. I normally would have some of their numbers or find their numbers online. It was mostly friends, parents who own businesses and or people I've just met who work at like a closing title company who would want to put their name on the banner. And so the first year we have different tiers. So it's like if you do the redfish level, it's let's just say $500. You get your picture and name on the banner.
Hmm.
And if you do $1,000, you get a shout out on the podcast, and you get like more raffle prizes, a bigger picture, bigger logo. We say your name at the weigh-in. And then if you did even more, you'd come on the podcast and we would put your logo on our website and everything like that. So
Okay.
we would tier list it and we would just email it over to them and they would pick. Um, One thing that was tough was it's still tough for us today. So we're trying to figure out how to work with we tried to do it in one year and it was kind of a cluster. We're trying to get like through a nonprofit one. So then when people donate, it is a tax write-off for them. So they'll be willing to give you more money, and we can give more money to whoever we are donating money to that year.
Oh,
Um,
so it's a tax write-off as well.
so it's not for us. So when that's why
Okay.
sometimes it's tough to convince them to give you more because they're like, so can you send us? I think it's a 1031c3, and it's a that's like the form that you submit your taxes with.
Okay.
But um, we don't have one, so we're just like, yeah, you're just giving it to us. You got to trust us with it and just give us just just help us fund the rodeo. So it's been pretty good.
Okay. Okay. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And
Hmm.
with this, would you say that the people who are in the rodeo, that the people who I guess are stakeholders of the rodeo, like whether they're sponsors or whether they're people who are going out and fishing or whether they're, whoever that may be, are the same people as the people who listen to the podcast?
Yeah, I would say so. It's been cool. So it's been the first year. It was kind of friends and family. We had some people that listened to the podcast. Most people knew we did the podcast, but they didn't tune in and listen. They were just kind of coming out to support us and help us out and have fun.
Right.
But this past year, this was our fourth fishing rodeo, and it's been awesome because we always knew the first one and the second one a little bit was not really our clientele for who listened to the podcast. It was more friends and family and
Yeah.
some teams. But this year, last year and this year, so the third and fourth annual, it really kind of made the jump where it was mostly people listening to the podcast or following our Instagram account.
Right.
This year we had 34 teams, and I would say friends and family were probably eight of the teams. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so we had a ton of people who we've just met through the podcast, through telling people about the podcast, and or who follow the Instagram account.
Right. And were these people who came on or who listened to the podcast in like did they find you through like Spotify through listening to the podcast or did they find you through like you had someone on as a guest and then they started listening?
So I think it's a combo. Some of them we've become friends with through our Instagram account who listen to the podcast and they'll come and talk to us through there, and
Okay.
then they'll tell their friends, and we'll sometimes just call them during the podcast and be like, "Hey, he went fishing this weekend. Let's give him a call." Um, so some through that, and then some also might have just saw all of our ads saying winner gets $2,500. So
That'll
that
do it.
yeah, that could have gotten some people, but I think it's kind of a mismatch of stuff, and then some of it's really just grinding and reaching out and DMing random people and just kind of in a way networking
Yeah.
through the fishing world, just trying to get people to come out and support.
Okay, so if we go down that line, like for like the ecosystem access, right? Like
Hmm.
to what extent has the podcast helped you get into the fishing community in Southeast Louisiana, and like have those connections turned into, opportunities for the rodeo?
Yeah, so definitely. So like when we had we'll have like one guy on, talk to him, we'll have fun, and then he'll be like, "Oh, you got to get my buddy who is a fishing guide out of this area of Louisiana where you'll never touch on." So
Right.
then we talk to him, and then it kind of just is a snowball effect of people wanting to help us out and bring people on, and us helping them out because they know if they come on, it's free publicity for their company. A lot of people we would bring on would be fishing guides or
Charters.
hunting guides, yeah, charters.
Okay.
Um, so we would have those people on, and then in return, that led us to going fishing with them.
Right.
Um, they getting teams for our fishing rodeo because they would be like, "Oh, well, you can't beat me," and then they would kind of have their own little competition within the big competition. Um, and it's helped with sponsors. So like Chaz Champagne and the Campos who run Campos Marina, they're all helpful with putting up advertising, um, letting us come out, helping us out with everything. If we need something, they'll always help. And it's just got us to meet a lot of people who are fishermen who we would have never met before.
That's amazing. All right,
Yeah, so
here's
it's
another question. So, how much has doing the podcast taught you about fishing and hunting?
a ton because my parents were not big fishermen or hunters. Our grandfather was, and he taught us a bunch. But he, I learned a ton from these other people. And it's been great because Chase is kind of the same way. His family, they kind of grew up, but we didn't have boats or anything. So I, uh, I caught a big bass, and then it really got me fired up. So then I bought a boat, and then your dad, our Uncle Bob, he had a camp down there. So I went down there a couple times right when I got my boat. He showed me kind of the ropes of where to go, and then right when I got comfortable going out there, we had to get rid of it. So that he helped a lot, and then just going down there, most people in the fishing community are pretty nice people. Um, and they'll help you out with stuff. So, but like knowing where to go, knowing how to read maps, um, knowing the laws, like when it's safe to go out, reading the weather. Like the first time my boat, I have a 16-foot aluminum flatboat, and I used to not really look at the weather when we first went out. So my first 5 trips going out, we got caught in massive lightning storms. So I named my boat the Storm Chaser because we were always running into massive storms.
What a name!
And yeah,
What a name!
but people have sent me apps and how to read the weather, what's the best way to do it, all that stuff. Because Apple Maps just doesn't cut it.
Yeah,
You gotta look outside.
yeah. And how much has it taught you about how to throw the rodeo? How much has doing the podcast taught you about the rodeo?
So that's kind of been trial and error.
Okay.
That I've kind of called other people who've run events. I'm lucky. My dad, he's always done. He's a basketball coach, and he runs tournaments all the time. So I grew up running tournaments like that and learning raffles and things like that, and going to like golf tournaments like scrambles and knowing how to make it fun and do events. So, but the first year was a massive learning curve when we forgot there was daylight savings time when we when we made it. So we made everyone show up at the marina at I think like 5 a.m. 4:30, 5 a.m. for check-in, and then we would send you on your way. But I think it was 30 degrees, blowing 25-mile-per-hour winds, and the sun didn't come up until 6:45. So it was like,
Intense.
yeah. So it was like everyone was just waiting there, freezing their balls off, and it was cold and ugly. And then luckily we had one guy who ran a fishing rodeo who just happened to be this girl's boyfriend at the time who hung around and helped us set up. And he was like, "Oh, well, you need this, you need that, you need this." And we were like, "Oh."
Oh
So
wow.
he was if we didn't have him that first year, we would have been in some trouble. Um, and then we learned from that. Then the next year it was a little better. We moved check-in time a little farther back, had people come in a little later. And then the next year we just said you can launch anywhere you want. Um, but you have to be back to our weigh-in section at a certain time or you're disqualified. Um, so that's helped a lot. And then we've also tried to bring people on board to help us with the fishing rodeo. Like we met this guy Jordan Elliott with Premier Bow Fishing Charters, who we did it this year at his camp. And
How'd you
that's
meet
another
Jorda?
yeah through so Justin who runs Boot Crew Media knew him, and he was like, "You got to get this guy on." So we met him through the podcast,
Wow.
um, and that has
He
been a great.
hosted, right?
Yeah, we did it at his camp. So us two we combined for this year's fishing rodeo, which was awesome.
That's amazing. That's like a huge impact. Like
Yeah, it was
also the
great.
place was unbelievable. Like
Unbelievable.
and right by, where for the weigh-ins, right by the marsh where you want to fish.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Yep.
didn't have to run a long ways. That makes a big
Yeah.
difference.
Right. And so the last place we did it, it was kind of tougher fishing. You could drive away, but it was kind of tough. And if it was windy conditions, you were kind of screwed. So this year it was nice to do it where most everyone fished.
Okay. That's amazing. All right, so got a couple questions for you, like demographics wise to compare, right?
Okay.
So, do you know how many listens your podcast gets per episode right now?
So we didn't check. I know at one point we were getting around a thousand downloads.
Okay.
And then they would vary depending on the guest. And we figured out when to put them out, and it matters what time you put them out and things like that. Um, but probably around that.
Probably around 1,000 now. Okay.
Hmm.
And at the beginning, like, was there a curve that grew over time?
Yes, definitely. So was our first one not much, and then it really kept going. And the more consistent we were, the more we would get. Like when we were doing it 2 times a week when we first started, we would do it like every Monday and Wednesday, and then we would release them on Thursday and maybe Monday or Tuesday. Um, so we would recap. So the one when we would do on Thursday, release on Thursday, we were talking about what our plan was that weekend, where we were going fishing, how we were doing it, and then the one after we would recap what
Right.
happened during the weekend. And then we would throw in a guest in between. So
Right.
we would do our normal breakdown, normal episode, then have a guest on. Um, so those that helped.
So 1 and 1, and you had been fishing over the weekend, right?
Yep. And then when you didn't go fish, you were like, oh well, we'll just have to make something up. We'll have to talk about we'd come up with different topics like what's our favorite top five favorite boat snacks. Where's the favorite place to get breakfast on the way down there, which was always bacon, egg, and cheese croissant at day and night.
So solid.
Yeah. Things
So
like that.
solid.
Yep.
Okay, and then all right, second question. So like that's the growth of the podcast. How about the growth of the business? You said that it went from 15 to 34 now. That's a big
Hmm.
jump.
Yeah, so it's the fishing rodeo has really been taking off. We've been kind of slacking on doing the podcast. Um, but we've been active when it comes fishing time and stuff like that, we'll get active. And the growth of the tournament has really taken off, which has been
Yeah.
great. And it's been a lot of I think it's just because we've met people throughout I guess now 4 years, 4.5 years of doing it. And they know we put out a good product. And they always seem to have fun. A lot of the people have been repeat fishermen, and or they tell their friends to bring a boat to come in with them.
Okay.
So like one year, so like for instance, this year one team had three, or last year one team had three fishermen. This year, all three of those fishermen had their own boat, with two other people each on each boat.
Right.
So they were like, well, let's try to have more teams in this and we can compete instead of you trying to be the captain. And then that's kind of how it's been growing.
And would you say,
And
like you said, 15 the first year, 34 the last year, would you say that the growth of the podcast has scaled with the growth of the business? Like, would you say that those are related?
um, I would love to say yes, but this year we were probably the slowest on doing podcasts. So this year our podcast has probably gone down, but the fishing rodeo went up.
Okay.
But we were more active doing like short podcast clips that we'd put on our Instagram, and just a
Yeah.
ton of promotion videos and sharing our podcast and information about the rodeo
Oh, so you would
everywhere.
promote the podcast more, and so maybe it drove people
Yeah,
from other platforms.
and we would promote the rodeo more. Like
Okay.
we would put the rodeo. I put the rodeo everywhere. We got flyers, we got everything, but
The
it's always
shirts.
nice when you put like Sportsman's Paradise podcast, fishing rodeo. So they
Right.
kind of know both of them.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Last sort of tangent, you know? So would you say that like what kind of people listen to the podcast? Who are you talking to?
We always like to say we're pretend we're talking to no one. We're like pretend no one's listening to us, so we're
Nice.
never worried about who's listening. So we get a lot of times I'll say something dirty or bad, and I'll say, "All right, sorry, mom. Hope you're not listening to this one." But other than that, we like to just think we're talking to people who would like our humor and our information. So we think it's mostly like mostly fishermen by now, who kind of, and then some friends. Um,
So fishermen, and is it like guys, girls? Is it a certain age range?
I would say it's mostly guys.
Mostly guys.
Some girls do listen, and they'll say like, oh, they'll like them. But I would say it's mostly guys. I don't know the numbers, but
Okay.
if I had to guess, it would be mostly guys.
Mostly guys. Is it probably younger, like or
I think our age range is from like 23 to 34,
okay.
around that.
Okay, but it's not something that you're super tuned into. You mostly just put it out and what
Yeah,
happens happens.
yep, exactly. Yeah, we're not at all. Not like we don't even look at our numbers. Like
Okay.
we just are like, let's do it, and we just go and do it, and just
That's really funny. See, the
yeah.
thought process I was having was maybe the people that you're maybe it's the same, demographic that's listening to the podcast that could go to the rodeo. I was thinking maybe there was some crossover there.
There definitely is some crossover, and our the fishing rodeo is mostly men. You'll have like some fun teams that are women, but it's mostly like my mother and her friends, and
Right. Well, they did really
that's
well
about it.
this year, huh?
Yeah, they crushed it. I thought they were gonna win. I was hoping they were gonna win.
That would have been
Um,
awesome, man. That would have
yeah,
been
I would
awesome.
love to get some fun ladies teams in there though, because they crack me up. And like another, so we have two all women teams. One of them is my good friend's mom, who's she grew up around they grew up around the corner from me, so I was over there every day. Um, so they come and they crack me up. All the women, they always have full uniforms, which I love. They get their matching shirts and vibrant colors and just have an absolute blast. So
That's
I've got to get more
unbelievable.
of that. Yeah, I've had some people have suggested we do a all women's fishing rodeo as well. Like at a
And
different
all
point of the year.
women's?
Yeah, and you can have like if they can't drive the boat, you can have a husband or a guide drive the boat for them, but it'll be kind of like a little they'll have their little bachelorette parties that aren't bachelorette
That'd be
parties.
cool. Or even a subcategory.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
that'd be
Hmm.
great. That'd be awesome.
So
All
that would
right.
be
Well,
fun.
Kent, thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome. I
No
appreciate it,
problem.
man.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for thinking of me.
Oh, yo, wait. Actually, one more question. Would you say
Yes.
that the sponsors or the participants what's a bigger deal from a like perspective of you're trying to grow the rodeo?
I truly believe it's 50-50.
Okay.
Because you need the sponsorship to run the whole tournament. Like to rent out the place, to buy the beer, to buy the food, to buy the microphones, speakers, signs.
Yeah.
Things just add up. Like when you have to get extension cords, tables,
Yeah.
chairs. So you
Yeah.
need to get sponsorship money from that. So then you don't have to charge the teams an arm and a
More, yeah.
leg to come out and join.
And like from
Um,
a revenue perspective, what's that like percentage? Would you say that there's more revenue from the sponsors or from the teams?
More revenue from the sponsors, because if you land one sponsorship that will give you, if you land like if so we had like six sponsors that donated like $1,200, and then
Okay.
you get your one. We're now sponsored by Miller Lite. They give like 5,000, but they give that kind of throughout the year. So
Yeah.
we save a good amount of it for the fishing rodeo, because we don't really spend money on anything. um And then the teams are kind of they build up your prize money and some of the other money. But if you have a ton of sponsors and you only get 10 teams, then if a sponsor shows up, they're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
So you work off both of them.
So the teams drive the sponsors, but you need the sponsors to have enough money so that you can throw the rodeo.
Right. Yep.
It's a
Yeah.
whole circle there.
Yeah. So they really
Wow.
work hand in hand.
That's kind of a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it's stressful. It's those 3 months leading up to it. I'm always freaking out because you'll learn this if you throw an event. No one likes to sign up on time. They wait until the last week and or the last 3 days. So you never know how many
Right.
people are actually going to be there. So I'm always stressed, like, geez, we only got 18 teams at things in a week and a half, and then 5 who said they're going to sign up, they'll sign up the next week. And then
Yeah.
the last day, it's like, oh, can I still sign up? It's like, well, yeah, just Venmo me, you son of a gun. You had 4 months to do this. Now you're waiting till
And
the
I
last
bet
second.
the sponsor's probably going to ask you, well, how many people are signed up?
Right, exactly. And when you're called, because you have to call your sponsors first, because you got to get everything logistically lined up with them. Like you have to go get their products to put out,
Yeah.
get their logos shipped, get the signs printed. And sometimes it takes longer than you can't just do it like that's the type of stuff you can't really do last minute. And like, well, how many teams you got? And it's like, well, you got to always hit them with like, oh, well, we're projecting 34. We have one team signed up right now, though. So you just say, well, we're expecting around 30, 35 teams this year. And then I always like to send all of the last year's data.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I'll
so the
normally
track
make a
record
little,
too.
yep.
So the
Yes.
podcast, the social media to support the podcast, because you get the clips out there, so that drives people to the show. Then
Yep.
you have the guests who you meet, and those people end up being like, they teach you everything that you need to know, and they might like you got the location through them,
Mm-hmm.
and you learned, and you got it's hosting, it's that's the biggest benefit of the podcast probably.
Yeah.
And there's some crossover with the people who buy tickets who
Mm-hmm.
sign up because they found you through the podcast. But then a
Yep.
lot of it initially was friends and family, and then you had met everybody in the ecosystem. They came, they got competitive, and then they split into their teams, and everybody came back year over year.
Yep.
And once you had success in year 2 or 3, then you could send the data to the sponsors and say, look, we actually are doing a thing here.
Yep.
Then they're more comfortable because nobody signed up. So you have to get them comfortable so that they can actually like say, all right, well, Twisted Tea will do it, or whoever it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Miller
And
Lite now. Twisted Tea. I'm
Twisted
just
Tea's
kidding.
done.
Twisted Tea's done.
Miller
Miller
Lite
Lite now. Miller
only.
Lite and Topo Chico.
Topo Chico. I love it. I love it. Well,
And
Kent,
then
it's been awesome. Thank you, man. I really
no
appreciate it.
problem. Yes, great seeing you also. You're looking great.
You too, man. All
All
right.
right.
How's it
Later.
going?
Good luck. Good luck. Hope you ace it. Give this guy an A. He's the smartest in the family.
Much love, man.
All right. Later.
Bye.
Good luck.